Welcome to the Possibility Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton, aka Possibilityman. We're committed to bringing you guests who strive to better people's lives and serve as a force for good in the world. Our guest today is Kathleen Gage. She is a lifestyle and business strategist. She has written over 20 books and hosts 2 podcast shows. She's passionate about plant-based living and working with people who are ready to live a healthy lifestyle. She is a public speaker and has been inspiring audiences around the globe for over 25 years. Her unique style blends compassion, humor, and, as she calls it, edginess into her presentations that leave audiences ready to conquer the world. Kathleen also says that I am 100% committed to raising awareness about cruelty-free living through a plant-based vegan lifestyle. Kathleen, welcome to the show today.
Stephen, it is great to be here, and I'm looking forward to some possibility.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to talking with you as well, but first, this program note to our audience and our listeners: follow, like, and share this podcast wherever you find it. Kathleen, once again, I'm happy to be with you today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Hey, I got a ton of questions. When I introduced you, and of course, you are such a prominent person, I got flustered in the process. This doesn't usually happen to me. But I talked about plant-based, your podcast, but you also are a business professional. Could you give us a brief synopsis of your business biography?
I would love to, Stephen. It's interesting when people hear that I work within the vegan market, they automatically assume that I'm a nutritionist. And when I became vegan a few years ago, I actually got my certification for plant-based nutrition through Cornell University because I thought that was the path I would go on. And what I realized was that's not my wheelhouse. That's not really my passion to coach people in that. I'm a business strategist. I'm a visibility strategist, and I actually work with vegan businesses, with plant-based businesses. So if somebody's a consultant or a coach and they want to get visibility, I would be the person that would work with them. But if they're looking to tighten up their eating and all that, I have clients that I can refer them to. So in a nutshell, that's what I do. I've had my business 30 years. Obviously, I have not been a vegan business focused owner for that length of time because I've been vegan for about 5 years now. And when I first started out, like many entrepreneurs, I was all over the map, and it was like, what do you need? Oh, I can do that. And then I quickly learned that the more general I was, the more broke I would be. So over the years, I've reinvented myself many times. But bottom line is I love marketing, I love promotions, and I love helping business owners who have a mission to raise their awareness in the world.
Okay. So now, why did you, for yourself, choose a plant-based vegan lifestyle?
What a great question. Actually, when I first started, I was 64 at the time. So I'm coming up on my 70th birthday in a few months. And when I first started, it was because of inflammation. And I would not call myself vegan because I thought vegans were crazy. I thought they pushed their agenda on people. I thought, they're really rude. And now that I do identify as a vegan, I understand a lot of the mindset around that. But initially, it was because I had inflammation. And I was at an age that was pretty common. And we were led to believe that that's what happens as you age. Started doing some research and came across the book by Dr. Joel Fuhrman, Eat to Live. That was kind of the start of the rabbit hole that I went down and started studying the works of Dr. Michael Greger, Dr. T. Colin Campbell, all of the greats. I dug deep and I realized that if I gave up meat and dairy, I probably would get rid of the inflammation. So I gave it 7 days. I thought, okay, I'm going to give it 7 days. If it works, great. If not, I'm going back to eating meat and dairy. And little did I realize, Stephen, at the time, how disconnected I was because I have been doing animal rescue for years. I claim to be an animal lover. I've rescued horses, dogs, cats, ferrets, goats, you name it, I've rescued it. And yet on the one hand, I'd be rescuing, on the other, I'd be eating. And it was like, this makes no sense at all. And once I started doing plant-based, actually within 2 days, the inflammation was gone. I was about 50 pounds heavier than I am now. And I dropped some weight. I've been a yo-yo dieter all my life and dropped some weight. And I was like, wow, that's a nice byproduct. And I thought, I'll give it another 7 days and 7 more days. And within 2 weeks, I dropped like 10 pounds. And I'm like, I'm not even trying to lose weight. This is pretty amazing. I was feeling better. I was sleeping better. I felt more energized. I was a runner at the time, and I still do some running, but my legs would get really sore from running. That went away. And I'm like, okay, this is almost like a miracle drug. So I started really digging even deeper. And it was about 6 months into my journey that by that point, I had watched movies like Dominion and What the Health, and a lot of the movies documentaries that explain what happens in factory farms. And so the door had been slightly opened for me, and I was at the grocery store walking by the meat department to go to another department. And I literally stopped in my tracks, and I could feel the pain and suffering. I had a visceral response to looking at the meat all wrapped up, realizing how it got there. And it was in that moment that I realized I am a vegan, and everything started moving in that direction. So it started out of health. And now it's about the animals, it's about health, it's about the environment, and it's about educating other people as to the lifestyle choices we make to give us a quality of life where many of the diseases that people have are a direct result of what they're putting into their body.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because you made the choice because of health. And I know you're not a coach, health coach per se, but from your experience and your knowledge, do you feel that people can improve their health by a vegan plant-based lifestyle?
100%. Myself, I'm a living example of that. I, again, was about 50 pounds heavier than I am. I was on the path and the trajectory to having the diseases that people in their 60s and 70s tend to have, whether it be type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, all of that. And I actually, on my podcast show, and I produce podcast shows like for the National Health Association, they're the longest running plant exclusive organization in the world. They've been around for 75 years. I'm the producer of their podcast. We've interviewed people like Dr. T. Colin Campbell, Dr. Joel Furman, Dr. Brooke Goldner, who reversed lupus. Chuck Carroll, who dropped 245 pounds or 275 pounds as a direct result of going plant-based. I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it with people I've talked to, and just within the plant-based community. Yes, absolutely. And the number one disease that can be reversed is type 2 diabetes, which is
fantastic.
Kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's good to say, and it's good for people to know that they can do some things to make a difference in their health. So let me ask you now, because people hear plant-based, vegan, and they think, what the heck? What do people eat? What do plant-based vegan people eat, Kathleen?
Well, it's like pretty much we eat everything that doesn't have animal and dairy in it. And it's interesting because like right now I've got my green drink right here. I learned that from Dr. Brooke Goldner, which, phenomenal doctor. But I mean, beans, legumes, lentils, vegetables, fruits, and there's so many options. Like for dinner last night, we had burritos. The night before, I had a curry dish. And the only thing you're taking out would be the animal products, but there is a difference between being vegan and eating unhealthy and being vegan and being a whole food plant-based advocate, because a lot of people, especially now with all the fake meats and the products that are being put out there that are vegan, there are a lot of unhealthy vegans, and that's concerning because the reality is most vegans are very passionate about spreading the message about being kind to animals. But if we're not healthy, there's not a lot we can do. We just don't have the energy. So for me, my identification, if you will, is that I am vegan first and I'm a whole food plant-based eater.
Yeah.
So, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, please finish that
Well,
thought.
there's a lot of choices. I mean, pretty much I have a great spaghetti recipe that I cook. I do tacos, I do burritos, I do Thai menus. And what's so interesting, Stephen, is that before I became vegan and before I was really into the whole plant-based type of cooking, I didn't like to cook. And I wasn't, it was not something I enjoyed doing. Now it's so interesting when I cook meals, and especially if I'm going to have company over, I actually get pretty excited about it because I think of all the love that's going into that meal and the love that it took to get that meal on the table, and the lack of pain and suffering that the animals go through, because that's a pretty important issue to me. People just don't realize what really goes on in factory farms. And it's not just the animals who are the victims, it's the people who work there too that are oftentimes the victims.
Yeah. Okay, we'll get into that a little more later, because I know that's very huge for you. But I wanted to ask you, is plant-based, from your experience, sustainable? Because that's another question that people ask. Can I live this way for a long period of time?
Absolutely. And I think it's even more sustainable than eating meat and dairy. I have one client who is 35 years a plant-based vegan eater, Linda Middlesworth. She's nearly 80 years old. She teaches aerobics, kickboxing. The woman's just a rock star. She's amazing. And you look at her and you go, that's what I want to be like when I turn 80. Mark Huberman, who is the president of the National Health Association, he's 72 years old. He's been vegan all his life. And very, very healthy. And it's interesting because I think one of the areas where people have a misunderstanding or misconception is they base their decision whether or not to be vegan or plant-based on how people look, because you can actually build a lot of muscle by eating a carnivore diet. You can also build a lot of muscle by eating a plant-based diet if you get enough protein. And so I think it's really important for people to look at what's going on inside somebody's body, because when I go for my physicals, my doctor is like, keep doing what you're doing. Your numbers are great. And there was a point where she was going to put me on medication for high blood pressure. She said, you're going to have a stroke if you keep going the way you are. This was pre-plant-based. And she said, I'm going to have to put you on medication. And I'm like, give me 30 days. So I went on a crash diet and lost some weight, and then it all came back. And I think plant-based eating, if you do it right, and getting the book Eat to Live would be a great start. But when you do it right, you actually do have a much more sustainable lifestyle.
Now, you mentioned protein, because that's one of the questions people ask me. If I don't eat meat, where am I going to get my protein? Well, how would you respond to that?
Protein is in just about everything, and leafy greens are probably one of the best ways to get protein. And that's why I do my green drinks, because I've got more protein in this one glass of green drink than somebody would have in a 1 pound steak. And you got to look at the fact that animals get their protein from the grass and from the foods that they're fed. And so people think that they're getting protein from animals, and in reality, they're not. What they're getting when they eat animals is they're getting steroids, they're getting antibiotics, they're getting a lot of just yucky stuff. But your protein actually comes from your beans, your legumes, your lentils, your greens, fruits and vegetables. Protein's in just about everything. And here's the thing, that with a lot of what we've been led to believe around protein, that has been fabricated by the food manufacturers to get us to believe that we need the protein, the high levels of protein. We don't need as much protein as we've been led to believe. With milk, getting calcium from milk. The best way to get good calcium and build good bones is to do resistance training. That's a fact of life. So it's like, we don't need the dairy, but we do need exercise.
Yeah. Now, you're also described as an advocate for a plant-based lifestyle. What does that mean? When we see this all over the web, you're an advocate. What does that mean? Yeah.
It means that I promote and I support a plant-based lifestyle. It means that I'm really in favor of a plant-based lifestyle, and I do what I can. For example, I'm partnering with a group of people who have plant plant pure pods, which are communities of people that they get together in different communities, and they have potlucks. They might have educational programs. They might take walks together, and they talk about what it means to be a plant-based eater. Well, I've partnered with my business partner with 5 other people, and we're actually putting on summits that are free of charge just to educate people on how to start a community and grow a community within your local market.
Yeah. You've already brought this subject up, Kathleen, about your love for animals. And I'm just curious, when did that start for you? Is this a childhood thing that
Ever since
yeah.
ever since I was a kid? I remember as a kid, I actually had a frog farm. My father helped me. I used to go down to the creek and bring back frogs. And my dad, he tried to convince me that it was better to leave them at the creek. And he thought, well, if you're going to do this, let's make sure that the frogs are safe. So we built a frog farm. I had several hamsters as a kid, cats, dogs. I mean, I've had a love of animals ever since I was a kid. But somewhere along the line, I got disconnected from what it meant to really love the animals and not consume them.
Yeah. And you also mentioned that I think you are engaged in rescuing all sorts of animals.
Yes.
So do you own any animals? Let me ask you that.
Well, I think they own me more than I own them, Stephen. So we have 3 horses who are rescues. We have 2 dogs, rescues. We have a cat that's a rescue. We have chickens that are rescues. And it's interesting because I've had people say, well, how can you have chickens if you're vegan? We rescued the chickens. We don't eat the chickens. They have the best life. We get the best quality food for them, and they get very, they'll actually come to the back door and start clucking like, it's food time. So yes, we have a number of animals.
Yeah. So you live in Oregon, don't you? Are you Oregons?
I do.
Okay. So when you rescue, let's say, a horse, I mean, are these horses that are owned by other people, or are they horses in the wild, or what?
Both. And what's really sad is most people have no idea how abused horses can be. There was one rescue that there were over 100 horses who had been abandoned. It was probably about 10, 12 years ago when people were taking the horses down to Mexico for the food trade down there. And the gas prices had gone up, so horses were getting abandoned, and these horses were abandoned in the high desert. By the time that they were discovered, over 65 of them had starved and died from heat exhaustion. And, so that's one way that horses get rescued. And another way would be when last year and the year before, we had terrible fires, and a lot of the people had to abandon their properties, and the animals had to be rescued. That's another way. And then when somebody is mistreating their animals, which, a lot of people are under the mistaken notion that you just get a horse and then you put it out to pasture and it takes care of itself. Our horses have special feed. We have 2 horses that we have to feed alfalfa to because it gives them more calories, and they tend to not keep weight on. We have another one that has a thyroid problem, so he gets thyroid medicine. So there's all sorts of different things that you have to do in order to take care of your animals. But what's interesting, like with dogs, a lot of people don't realize why dogs have so much cancer nowadays, and they literally have high blood pressure. They have a lot of the same diseases that humans have because humans feed them human food. And so when we start looking at the problems with animals, a lot of it can be traced to what are you feeding your animals?
Now, a moment ago, you mentioned, when you said it, I said, well, I got to ask you about this. You mentioned horses and the food trade. And can you tell me more about that? Or did I mishear you?
No, you heard me right. There are cultures where horse meat is actually a delicacy, if you will, and they eat horses like we eat cows. I don't know a lot about it, so I really can't speak to it as an expert, but I do know that it is a fact. It does go on, just like dogs in certain cultures are eaten. And we look at that and we go, oh, how can people eat dogs? And they're looking at us going, how can people eat cows? So I think that it just depends on the culture. But yes, horses have been consumed and then they've been used. I used to think this was a fallacy, but for glue and just different things that they are killed for.
Right. Now, we're talking about your compassion for animals. And one thing that's clear about your bio is that you talk about factory farming. And tell us about that. When that comes up for you, factory farming, what comes up for you?
I just think of the pain and suffering the animals go through. And there are people who say, oh, so what you're saying is that you would prefer no animals be in existence. And it's like, I would prefer no factory farmed animals be in existence because they are force bred. They are in very confined quarters. They are given steroids to grow very rapidly, which, can break their legs. And just the mistreatment, like with cows, the babies are taken away upon birth. And that's such inhumane treatment. Now, the thing that a lot of people don't realize, they go, well, how could people work at factory farms? Oftentimes, the people who work at factory farms are illegal immigrants and they're looking to feed their family. So this is one of the only jobs they can get. They did some undercover work recently and discovered, I don't know which company it was, I think it might have been Smithfield, but they were actually having minors working in the factory farms. They have very little health protection. There's a lot of abuse that goes on. And they have found that the people that work in factory farms, some do it by choice, very few do. I would say probably 95%. If they could find another job, they would find another job. But it's a matter of, we've got to put food on the table. And what happens is when you put yourself in that kind of an environment, you actually find that your personality will change. They become more sadistic. There's a lot of abuse that goes on within relationships. There's a lot of drug abuse, alcohol abuse, as a result of what people are subjected to. And I'm not by any stretch of the imagination condoning the fact that they work there, but I am saying that there's more to the story than just about the animals, that the animals are the victims and the people working there in many cases are the victims. And what happens is they can shut down and they take on a more sadistic kind of personality, and it's out of survival. There are things that people are subjected to that we have no way of understanding it unless we walk a mile in their shoes.
Yeah, I think there's a disconnect between consumers, because we go to the market, right? We just buy stuff in the market, but you're telling us there's some things that are happening in the background. So let me throw a word out to you and see what you do with it. We haven't talked about this. This is on the spot. Slaughterhouses. What comes up for you?
Just slaughter, just murder. Yeah. And when you think about how they put the animals down, often they boil them alive. I mean, there's things that go on that if people have not done their research, I do encourage you to watch some of the documentaries, read some of the books. There's a book called Eternal Treblinka, and it was about concentration camps and the association between how we treat animals and how we treat people. And some people, there's a lot of people that would say, oh, the two are so far removed, and not necessarily, because with a lot of people that are abusive as adults, they started by abusing animals as children. And so I think that for me, when I hear the term slaughterhouse, it's just very inhumane treatment.
Yeah, that's for sure. Now, when people think about, let's say, chickens and turkeys, many of us think that they're all farm raised somewhere in the world, where they're roaming about. Is that your sense of the chicken that goes from the farm, whatever type of farm it is, to the supermarket? Are all of them farm raised and in open spaces, or is there something else we should
not
consider?
At all? Yeah. Our chickens actually have about a half acre, where two chickens that roam on a half acre. I mean, they're very spoiled. But in reality, there are thousands upon thousands of chickens that they live in an environment where one's on top of another. They're living in their own feces. They get their beaks cut off as babies without any anesthesia. And they oftentimes will eat each other because that's the only food they have. So the reality is even when it says free roaming or free range, That just means that there's a little window that they can look out of. It doesn't mean that they're actually out in the open range, or if they are, they're packed in so tightly that there's no room to move. So imagine living in an environment where you couldn't move, you couldn't turn around, you couldn't see the light of day. A lot of animals go crazy in that environment, literally go crazy.
Yeah. I tell you what, I heard you talk about this on one of your podcasts, or you were being interviewed or something. And I'm plant-based, but I was not 100%. Like, I'm about 90% plant-based. And I heard you and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to tighten this thing up. So I'm glad you're doing what you're doing for sure. Yeah. By the way, I'll be 70 a few months before you. And I've been plant-based for almost 2 years now. I've dropped 50 pounds and feeling good. And it's a wonderful way to live. So
absolutely. We're walking a similar path. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
And what a great opportunity to be a role model for younger people, because like when I go to the gym and I look at younger people, I think, right on, you're doing something good for yourself. And I hope you continue through your life. But I think it's important for those of us who are in a position to do so to be role models for younger people.
Yeah, I'm surely. Now, I want to talk with you as a business professional, because there are a number of things that just caught my attention, when I see your bio and learn more about you. One is that you are a marketing strategist. Firstly, talk to us about what is a strategist? What is a strategist? And then let's use the modifier marketing for us to get deeper into that.
Okay, well, a strategist is somebody who actually maps out the plan for where somebody wants to go. So let's say that in a year, you want your business to be generating a certain amount of revenue. And the big thing with a strategist is to help people to be realistic. Because, I've talked to people who are not making any money and they say, well, I want to make $100,000 by next month. And it's like, great, wouldn't we all want to do that?
Yeah.
The reality is there are certain things that need to happen in order for you to achieve the outcomes you're looking for. I'm working with one client right now that the beginning of our relationship has been all about really looking at her marketing assets, like her website, her social media presence, her banners, all of that, and looking at that and saying, okay, does that align with the market that you're going after and what you want to accomplish? So if you want to accomplish something in a year, you look at that and then you reverse engineer it and you say, okay, what needs to happen? What are the mile markers that need to happen in order for that to become a reality? For example, somebody who writes a book and they say, I want to be a best-selling author. It's like, great. What do you plan to do to be a best-selling author? Well, I'm going to write the book. Great. What are you going to do after you write the book, or even before you write the book, to put your marketing plan in place? Because I've worked with a lot of authors over the years, and many of them, they think writing the book is the easy part. And that's actually the hard, or excuse me, they think that's the hard part. That's the easy part, because it's the marketing to get people to be aware. I was thinking about this when I was coming home from the gym today. It's like, how do people find out about different businesses? Well, they find out about it by people talking about the businesses, by social media posts, by advertising, by stories that have been written, by podcasts. And it's really about doing all you can to raise awareness. For example, Dr. Brooke Goldner, which I just recently was introduced to her works at the level that I am. And I'm really excited about what I'm finding about her online. And it's like, once I consume one piece of information, it's like, wow, that was so good. I want something else, and I want something else, and I want something else. That's part of your strategy, is to give people enough to where they can constantly consume your content and your information. So in answer to your question, a strategist is somebody who helps you to map out your plan.
And marketing is getting the word out, you're saying?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's different than sales. Some people think marketing and sales are one and the same. And you've got marketing, and then you have sales, which is you have to ask for the business. And there's a lot of people that they don't mind doing the marketing, but gosh forbid if they should ask for that sale. It's like, you should be happy to ask for the sale if it's a good fit, because if you are a good fit for a potential client, then you're going to be doing them a good deed by selling them your services so that they can get their message out to market.
And, you're also listed as a business strategist. Like, look, there's marketing, you do that, and then you're also business. So what's the difference? I know they're related, but what's the difference?
Well, the business strategy is the overall business. What do you want to accomplish in your business? And then the marketing are the pieces that go into raising awareness about the business.
Okay. So you've been doing this for a long time.
For a long time. I've had my business since 1994. So I've been around for a while. Prior to that, I was in broadcast media. Prior to that, I was actually involved with GTE Health Systems. I was in the marketing department and I was involved with trade shows. I have done a lot of events promotion and development. So yeah, I've been, ever since I was a kid, I actually have been very passionate about when I find something I believe in, I want people to know about it. When I think I was about 12 years old and the Vietnam War was going on, and that was a very controversial war, as we know. And yet the soldiers over there, for some reason, I belonged to Teenage Republicans at the time, and I was the vice president, 12 years old. So I was a high achiever at that age. And we decided we were going to send Christmas gifts to the soldiers in Vietnam. So we had to raise some money, and I would go door to door, actually asking people in my neighborhood to donate to this cause. And we were going to buy gifts for the soldiers. We got a lot of the stuff donated by different manufacturers, and really what the only thing we needed money for was the postage. But that was back when I think I was 12 years old at the time. So that would have been 1966.
Wow. Okay. So look, you're a business strategist, marketing strategist, business consultant, all of those things and many more around business. I got to ask you this, and I want you to be reflective for me, to reflect on my question. What are, let's say, 3 or so things that you've learned from your work as a strategist in those areas?
That is a great question. So let me reflect on that for a moment. And the first thought that comes up is it's not always going to be easy, but it'll be simple. There's a simple formula for success. It's like with our health. There is a simple formula for getting healthy. Is it easy? Not always. So it's not always easy. Another thing is that it takes persistence. You have to be willing to put in the time. Time takes time. And another thing is that you have to have a good plan, and you have to work that plan. One of the things I've learned, Stephen, in the years that I've been in business is I don't know it all. And if I think I do, then I better get out of business. And so I've hired mentors. And over the years, I've invested a lot of money in hiring mentors who could help me with particular things. One mentor will not be an end-all be-all to everything. And if they tell you they're probably not the right mentor. But I've had mentors for digital marketing. I've had mentors for personal development. I've had mentors for business plans. And so you want to look at what is it you want to accomplish in your business, and are you willing to invest in your business? Because the thing that I hear, especially from people who are new to business, is I can't afford it. And it's like, you can't afford not to invest in your business. You've got to get education, you've got to get training, you've got to find people who have been there before you, get involved in mastermind groups. Right now, my business associate, Velyn Hawkins, who's out of Atlanta, Georgia, she's in Bali at a mastermind, a very high-end mastermind. And there was a huge investment for her to be a part of that mastermind. Well, she's going to come back with the information, and we're going to implement it in our business. And we joined forces about a year and a half ago. We had been working on an event together. We found that we had a lot in common, and we started kind of doing the dance of should we, be business partners or not. Started with small projects, and now we've grown it into Vegan Visibility Productions, which is we basically put on summits for clients. We help them start podcast shows. We get them on podcast shows. So it all goes back to that visibility.
And I'm going to talk with you a little more about the podcast shows in a moment. But I got to ask you this, it's 2023. I mean, just in case people are listening to this like 20 years from now, we are in the post-COVID era, depending on who you're talking with. Some people are saying, Kathleen, look, it's too risky to start a business because of COVID. What is your sense of this? Are there still opportunities to start businesses today, or is just too challenging in this
Oh my
environment.
gosh, it'll always be challenging. I mean, that's a given. I look at the 30 years I've been in business. 2008 was tough. My business took a belly flop. 9/11, it took a belly flop. I was a keynote speaker doing a lot of keynotes at the time, had a lot of contracts on the table. Those got canceled. And then when COVID hit, literally it was like overnight, conferences got canceled. And that was where a big bulk of my business came from. So the reality is it will always be risky, and there's never going to be a perfect time. So jump in, but do it with the right support. Really do your research. Don't just have an idea and say, "Oh, I'm going to start a business." What you want to do is you want to get everything set up so that you do have mentors. You maybe join a good mastermind. And the thing to keep in mind is that you will grow into different levels of what you're going to invest in your business, but treat your business like a business, which means pay your taxes. That's a big one, because you don't want that to come and bite you in the backside. If you need to, get an accountant, get your mentors. SCORE is a great organization in most local markets where these are retired executives that actually mentor people at no cost. It's a government program. Join your local chamber if you're going to do local business, but get out there and do your research and realize it's never going to be the perfect time, but you can minimize your risks as long as you have the right information.
Yeah. Speaking of that, the right information, you give a lot of people information and support. One that comes to mind is that you are a social media mentor. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what you do?
I would love to. Actually, what I do with social media is I work with clients to find out, first of all, what's the best social media platform for the market that you're going after. Because, I remember back in the day when Facebook started and people said, "Oh, everybody has to be on Facebook." That's not necessarily true. If your market is more of a business market, LinkedIn would be the place to be. And it could be that TikTok is a great platform for you. With clients that I have that do anything to do with exercise and cooking, TikTok's a great platform. And that used to be for younger people. But basically, I work with people, teaching them which platform is best and encouraging them to keep going. Because one of the things that I find very interesting, Stephen, is people have a vision of where they want to go, but then when they have to put themselves out there, they're like, "Oh, well, I'll do a little more research." It's like, no. You've got to take that leap of faith and you've got to put your information out there. One client I'm working with right now, she just did her second masterclass. And at first she had all these excuses. I said, there's no excuse. Even if one person shows up, you're doing the masterclass, because you've got to get through that hump. You've got to get through your own block of putting your information out there. And I think a mistake that a lot of people make, whether it be with social media or just business or life in general, is they compare themselves with other people instead of comparing themselves with themselves. Where were you a year ago? Where are you today? Where are you going? And it's good to have comparisons with other businesses, and it's good to look at other businesses that are succeeding and those that are not succeeding, and look at what their model, their strategy is, and determine, does that fit for me? And just because somebody does one thing doesn't mean that that's right for you. It may not be a fit. So that's why mentors are such a good idea.
So speaking of social media, I mean, the question is always, in fact, I ask myself the question all the time, how often should I post? People are asking themselves, how often should I post on social media? What would you tell us?
Well, I 2 weeks ago, I would have given you one answer. Now I'm going to give you a whole different answer, because I'm actually going through a training myself right now to do with AI and social media. And Gary Vaynerchuk, he actually says that we should be posting at least 11 times a day. 11 times a day. Yes. Wow. And I mean, you look at him and you go, okay, obviously the guy knows what he's talking about. But what some people do is they say, I'll post once a week. That is not enough, because what social media is it's about engaging your audience. And what you want to do is you want to have a variety of information. You want to have videos, you want to have graphics, you want to have posts, and you can do what's called repurposing. So I would say whatever you're doing, probably 3 or 4 exit, and that's where you need to be. Myself, we've got a team of 4 people right now. And one of our team members has just yesterday, I gave him the task of learning this new software. I said, I want you to put the time in to learn it, because that's another thing in business. You have to decide, what is your time worth, and is you working on something the best choice, or is having a team member work on it a better choice? So I told him, I said, okay, I want you to study this program inside out, the platform inside out, the app inside out, and then you're going to come back and you're going to teach V-Lynn and I how to do it. And then we're going to teach the rest of the team, because basically what the program does is it 10X's what we're currently doing with social media.
Wow. Wow, that's impressive.
And we're actually set up as an agency for our clients. So we're going to be able to 10X what they're doing at no extra cost. So they're going to get the benefit of what we're doing. And that's what I love about what I do, Stephen, is that I get to learn and apply it to my business. And then if it works for my business, well, I'll try it for my clients too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're a busy professional, but as busy as you are, and this caught me, you are also a podcast host, and from your earlier comment, a producer. But not only that, you host more than one podcast. Tell us about, just list them for us. And
I'm crazy. I get it.
Yeah.
I actually have 2 podcasts, and one is called Vegan Visibility, and it's all about business strategies for vegan businesses. And it started out in 2000, I think it was 2014, as Power Up for Profits. It was pretty much general business strategies. And then I changed the name about 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago. And the other show that I have is called Plant-Based Eating for Health. On that show, I have people who live a plant-based lifestyle, and they're 100% plant-based. I will not have anybody on either of my shows that consumes any animal or dairy. Now, it wasn't always that way with the Vegan Visibility show, because prior to that, it was Power Up for Profits. So there are episodes on there where obviously the people are not plant-based, but one is for health. The other one is for business. And that's all part of my business model. And, Stephen, it's so interesting, because I could easily retire if I wanted to. And I thought about it for a while, and I was still doing what I do in business. So I thought, well, why would I retire if I love doing what I do so much? And sometimes the area is kind of gray of like, oh, is this part of business, or is this part of my personal messaging? And it's kind of like they all intertwine, because I put posts up when I'm leaving the gym. I just had a great workout, and I'll have a thought and I want to put it up, and it goes up on TikTok, and sometimes it'll go on LinkedIn, and sometimes it'll go on Facebook. So really what it is that there's no separation in what I do. I just do what I do, and I love what I do. So if I get an idea for a blog post, I'm going to do it. Then it goes up.
Wow. That's good to know. You just gave me an
But
idea.
I have so much, I have to tell you, the reason I can do it is because I'm a plant-based eater. Seriously, I have the kind of energy I have because I eat healthy and I live healthy. I'm completely alcohol-free. I have been for 40 years. Don't do any alcohol at all. I eat a very, very, very nutritious diet. I exercise on a regular basis. I meditate. I journal. I mean, I do the things that I know over the years that have benefited me to have the quality of life that I want. Because honestly, I don't want to be a statistic. I don't want to end up being in the hospital and just not having the kind of passion that I have.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Now, in terms of being a podcast host, you're also my guest today. Which side, and you've been on other podcasts as well, which side of the mic do you prefer? Which is easiest for you? Or
that is such an unfair question, Stephen. I love it both. I have to say that what I like about being a guest is that I never know what's coming. Like today's conversation, we've had a great conversation. And so I there was a lot of it. I had no idea what you were going to ask. And I love that, because I like those spontaneous conversations. And yet as a host, I get to pick and choose who I bring to my audience and what message they have that I really want people to hear. So I would say it's kind of sixes on that. I love them both.
Understand.
It's kind of like, who's your favorite child?
Understand. Yeah. I just have a couple of more things to ask you, because you are so versatile. as a professional. And I would say, and I know this is not hyperbole, you are also a lifestyle strategist, because I've seen you talk to people about limiting beliefs. So limiting beliefs, firstly, and I know you're pretty transparent, yourself, have you ever faced limiting or had limiting beliefs?
That is a great question. Thank you for asking it. And one of the reasons I don't drink is I have a very big problem with drinking. I used to be a blackout drinker, and I ended up on the streets as a result of it. And I look at my life today, and when I see somebody that is struggling out on the streets, I go, but for the grace of God, there go I. And I mean that sincerely.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I have had a lot of struggles. And I remember in my 20s, I went to a garage sale, and life was not working very well for me at that time. I was going through a very difficult relationship. I was married, and just not a good relationship. We were on our way to divorce. And I went to a garage sale, and I found a book called The Magic of Believing by Clyde Bristol is the author. It was written, I believe, in 1948. And I bought the book, and it was all about our thoughts, and it was all about the language patterns we have. And I read it, and I just was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then I thought, well, that's good for other people, but not for me. I don't deserve that. And so there was a period in my life, for whatever reason, that I chose to go down the path of drugs and alcohol very, very extensively. And people would say, what was your drug of choice? What did you have? That was my drug of choice. I'd put it in my mouth and then go, what did I just take? And so just to kind of give you a snapshot of how life was and how life is today. And it took a lot of work. It took a 12-step program. That was a big part of my spiritual development. It took getting mentors. It took doing a lot of reading. It took watching a lot of positive thinking things, and realizing it's more than just affirming. It's really taking the action. So, we can affirm until the cows come home what we want in life, but are we willing to take the action? Like, I want to be a very, very healthy 70-year-old. When I hit my 70th birthday, I want to be a rock star, healthy woman who has just hit 70. Well, that's not going to happen by me thinking about it. I have to think about it first, but then I have to take the action on a daily basis. So it's really about, yes, I have had those periods in my life. And what I love about life today is I know that life is going to throw me a curveball. My mother-in-law passed away 7 months ago. Very tough time. She lived on our property. So very, very tough time. But I didn't need to go out and stuff my face with sugar over it. I didn't need to go drink over it. I needed to use the tools that I've learned that have helped me to get through the tough times in life, because life is going to happen. There are going to be tough times, and it's not what happens, it's what we do with it that makes all the difference.
Yeah, I'm sorry for your loss, for sure.
Thank you.
So what would you say to someone, just maybe one or two things, who, well, firstly, how would you guide someone to identify their limiting beliefs, and what would you suggest in terms of dealing with those limiting beliefs?
Oh, you have some great questions, Stephen. I would say the one way to identify is, first of all, to become aware of it. I'll give you a great example of how conditioned we are through media to have certain beliefs. If you watch TV with a different perspective and watch the commercials that come on, notice how many meat and dairy commercials come on, and then right after that is a prescription drug. I mean, it's almost crazy when you suddenly take off the blinders and you go, wow, I never noticed that before. Once we are made aware of something, then we can pay attention to it. So with your beliefs, just carry a notepad with you, and throughout the day, notice when you're starting to get kind of edgy or judgmental, and write that down. Like, what just happened? What were you thinking? And what are you willing to do about it? I had a relative who was very negative, and she kept repeating things to herself, and she'd say it out loud. And I'd said, here's what I want you to do. Wear a rubber band around your wrist, and every time you say that one thing, I want you to snap the rubber band. And she came back to me and she said, wow, within 5 minutes, my wrist was so sore. I didn't realize how often I said that. So the first step is to actually just be willing to be aware. And then the next step is, once you notice that, then have something that will allow you to do things differently. For example, in your eating, if you are somebody who is a comfort eater, notice what you're putting in your body, like actually keep a journal. And my client, Linda Middlesworth, she teaches a class where she has what's called an emotional trigger journal, where people write down, what are the emotional triggers? What did I eat as a result of that emotion? How did I feel? And what can I do differently? So it's having the awareness, it's having the willingness to have the awareness, and then having the willingness to do things differently. Because unless we're willing to do things differently, nothing's going to change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, Kathleen, I'll tell you, there's one more thing I got to ask you about. And I love this about you, by the way. I mean, before we never, this is our first time talking. I love this about you. And one thing I noticed about you is that, I mean, as prominent as you are, your business, all of these accolades, professional speaker, you've once been president of the National Speakers Association in your state. Mm-hmm. With all of the successes, you are someone who still can be transparent. You've mentioned on this show alcohol and drugs. Mm-hmm. And I've got to ask you, what led you to this, to be able to be someone who is transparent in those areas? I'm just curious.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, thank you for asking that, Stephen. And I don't know that I have a definitive answer to that, other than I've done a lot of work on myself. And I do know that there were periods in my life that I would hear somebody tell a story about their own life, and it was like, really, I never would have guessed. And so I think from the people that have impacted my life, to have heard their story, that it gave me the courage to be able to tell my story. And I have one client I'm working with right now that lost her husband at the peak of the real estate market. He died from pancreatic cancer, and then she had to deal with that, and then fell in love a few years later. Within a few weeks of getting married, her next husband passed away from a brain tumor or something. Just, really just very tragic situations. And she actually teaches health and fitness to older women around plant-based eating. And I said, have you ever struggled with weight? Because you look at her and you think that she's never struggled with weight. And she goes, oh my gosh, yes. And she gave me a whole list of diets that she's been on. She talked about when she was heavier and how sluggish she was. And I said, I want you to share some of those stories when you do your next training. And she goes, but why would anybody want to hear that? I said, just, trust me. Share your story. Well, she shared her story, and a woman actually signed up to hire her as a coach, because she goes, I never would have guessed. She goes, I thought you always had the perfect life. And oftentimes when we try to be perfect, people don't get to know the real us. So it's not, one thing I learned in speaking many years ago with the first mentor I had, she said, do not use the platform as your therapy session, but share stories that have a reason for sharing them, and be willing to check your motives. Like before you do something, check your motives.
Yeah. I love that, Kathleen. What I hear you say is that you share your story in service to someone else.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. Hey, look, a lot of experiences from you. You've lived a long time. One last question, and I'm not sure if you've done this, but have you come to terms with your philosophy of life? Is there something like that for you?
When you say, have I come to terms with my philosophy of life, the only thing that I know is that if today was my last day, I would be complete. I've gotten to that point in life where I'm working with a group of people right now where we're doing an event, and we were doing a run through the other day. And I said, if we have a few hiccups along the way, it's not a big deal. I said, look at what's going on in the world today. That there is tragedy going on. If we have a slide that doesn't show up, who really cares? I mean, and I think it's just putting things into perspective and saying, okay, I'm very blessed. I mean, when I look at my life and I think I've got my health, I've got my animals, I've got my spouse, I've got a life that is simple, but it's very abundant. And by abundant, it's filled with a lot of love, a lot of joy. And when I look at that, it's like, and I compare that to what's going on in the world. What's going on in the world is tragedy in a lot of ways. What's going on in my life, if I don't get the contract that I thought I was going to get, who cares? I go on to the next thing. I mean, and so I think in answer to your question, it's just about being in resolve with life and knowing that I've lived a complete life.
That's fantastic. Look, you have been a wonderful guest.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for responding to me when I reached out to you.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me, Stephen. This has been delightful, and I so appreciate you inviting me onto your show, and I wish you the greatest success with it.
Okay. Well, you have been listening to the Possibility Action Network podcast. Our guest today has been Kathleen Gage. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton. Until next time, good day